What if I told you that the way you measure time, the concept of a 60-minute hour and a 60-second minute, was not decided at a modern scientific congress, but was recorded on clay tablets over 4,000 years ago? And what if I revealed to you that the first great work of literature in human history, a story about a king tormented by death who seeks immortality, was written long before the Iliad or the Odyssey? This is not a science fiction movie script. It is the echo of a lost civilization. The ghosts of a people who not only built the first cities, but invented the foundations of the world as we know it. A people whose name we barely whisper in the pages of history, but whose legacy lives in every second of our daily lives. We are talking about the Sumerians, and their story is, in the most literal sense, the story of all of us. A journey to our origins that we begin to unravel here in ancient truths. To understand our present, we must travel to a past so remote it seems more the stuff of myth than of history. We head to the south of modern-day Mesopotamia, a region today known as Iraq. We are in the 4th millennium before Christ. The world is a vast, wild, and chaotic place. But here, in a fertile and scorching valley between two powerful and unpredictable rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, something extraordinary is about to happen. It is not a gift from the gods, but a conquest of human ingenuity over a hostile environment. Before the great cities, during the Ubaid period, small villages of farmers and herders were already learning to cooperate. They domesticated animals, cultivated wheat and barley, and were beginning to organize small-scale irrigation. But it was during the Uruk period, around the year 3500 before Christ, when the explosion occurred. From these agricultural communities emerged humanity's first massive urban centers. City-states like Uruk, Eridu, Lagash, and They were not simple settlements. They were monsters of sun-baked mud brick. The first skyscrapers in history, dominated by imposing ziggurats, stepped temples that seemed to want to touch the sky, serving as a bridge between the mortal and the divine worlds. How was this quantum leap possible? The answer lies in organization and necessity. The land was rich, but the climate was a constant challenge. Devastating droughts followed by sudden floods that could wipe everything out. To survive and prosper, the Sumerians had to tame the rivers. They developed complex and massive systems of canals, dikes, and reservoirs to control the flow of water, distribute irrigation, and protect their harvests. This need to control water and manage crop surpluses forced them to innovate, to create social and political structures never before seen. They needed administrators, planners, laborers, and soldiers. They were laying the foundations of civilization, and every step they took was a first for humanity. In our journey on ancient truths, we will explore how these achievements are not isolated, but part of a revolutionary chain that changed the world forever. With tens of thousands of people living together, trading, working, and worshipping, human memory was no longer enough. How to keep track of the granaries, the herds, and the taxes. How to record treaties between cities or the king's laws. The Sumerian answer was as brilliant as it was simple: writing. Around the year 3500 before Christ, on soft clay tablets, cuneiform was born, the first system of writing in history. It began as pictograms, simple drawings of objects like a grain of barley or a head of cattle. But it quickly evolved into a complex system of wedge-shaped signs, made with a sharp reed on wet clay, which could represent syllabic sounds and abstract ideas like love or justice. This was not just an administrative tool, it was the big bang of information. For the first time, knowledge could be stored with precision, transmitted through generations, and accumulated. History ceased to be a shifting oral narrative and became a written record. The scribes, an elite educated in the Aduba or tablet houses, became the architects of their civilization's memory. The surviving Sumerian tablets tell us everything, from lists of mythical kings to love poems, from mathematical and astronomical texts to proverbs and student complaints. They are a direct window into their minds, their concerns, and their world. And if writing liberated the mind, the wheel liberated the body. Although its exact invention is a subject of debate among historians, the Sumerians were the first to depict it graphically and use it on a massive scale. First, for the potter's wheel, which allowed for much faster and more standardized ceramic production. Then, the true revolution, the wheel on a fixed axle, creating the first carts and wagons. This radically transformed the transport of goods, agriculture, allowing for the plowing of heavier fields, and, of course, warfare. Imagine the impact of seeing for the first time a war chariot pulled by onagers rolling onto the battlefield. It was a technology that changed the rules of the game. Furthermore, the Sumerians were pioneers in copper metallurgy, and more importantly, in the creation of bronze, an alloy of copper and tin. This new metal was harder and more durable, allowing for the creation of more efficient tools, more lethal weapons, and more sophisticated works of art. This advance marked the end of the Stone Age and the beginning of the Bronze Age in this region. These advances, which we take for granted today, were born from the need and creativity of a people who refused to accept the limits of their time. Exploring these origins is fundamental to understanding the path that has brought us here. A path that we continue unraveling in ancient truths. The Sumerians not only wanted to organize their society, they wanted to understand their place in the universe and bring order to the world's apparent chaos. And to do so, they developed a mathematical system that is still with us today, the sexagesimal, a base 60 system. Why is this important? Because it is the reason we divide an hour into 60 minutes, a minute into 60 seconds, and a circle into 360 degrees. The number 60 is highly divisible, which made it extremely practical for their calculations involving fractions, commerce, and geometry. Their tablets show that they could solve quadratic equations and calculate square and cube roots. Their precision in astronomy was astonishing. They observed the heavens with a religious patience, identified the 5 planets visible to the naked eye, which they called the Wanderers, for their movement against the fixed stars. They created the first lunar calendar, dividing the year into 12 lunar months of approximately 30 days each, and adding an extra month periodically to keep it synchronized with the seasons. They even laid the foundations for what would later become astrology and the zodiac, by identifying constellations and believing that events on Earth were directly connected with the movements of celestial bodies. For them, the cosmos was a reflection of the divine order, and to understand it was to draw closer to the gods. This desire for order was also reflected in their society. Long before the famous Code of Hammurabi, there existed the Code of Uruk, one of the first known examples of a written code of laws. This king of Lagash, around the year 2400 before Christ, established rules to protect the weak from the abuses of the powerful, regulated land ownership and fair prices, and sought to limit the corruption of priests. Although Sumerian justice was often harsh, based on the principle of the law of retaliation, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, the very concept of having written, public and applicable laws for all was a monumental step toward the rule of law. They demonstrated a political and social sophistication that challenges our perception of an ancient people. Their legacy is not just ruins, it is the invisible foundation of our world order. At the heart of each Sumerian city-state was the main temple, the E2, not just a place of worship, but the economic and political nerve center. The Sumerians were deeply polytheistic, and their pantheon was filled with hundreds of gods with very human-like personalities, who felt envy, love, anger, and jealousy. At the pinnacle were the supreme triad, Anu, the god of the sky, Enlil, the lord of air, land and fate, and Enki, the god of fresh water, wisdom and magic. According to their creation myth, the gods, tired of working to maintain the world, created humans from clay, mixed with the blood of a rebel god to serve them and work for them. The afterlife was not a promised paradise, but a gloomy and monotonous existence in the underworld, a land of dust and darkness called Kur. This vision of inevitable mortality and an unappealing afterlife gave rise to one of the most profound and moving literary works in humanity, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Written on cuneiform tablets over centuries, it tells the adventures of Gilgamesh, legendary king of Uruk, 2/3 god and 1/3 human. At first, an oppressive tyrant to his people, the gods create a wild man, Enkidu, to confront him. However, after a brutal fight, they become inseparable friends. Together, they accomplish incredible feats, such as traveling to the cedar forest to kill the monstrous guardian Humbaba and defying the goddess Ishtar. But when the gods punish Enkidu with a slow and painful death, Gilgamesh is terrified by his own finitude. Grieving and alone, he embarks on a desperate journey in search of immortality, seeking Utnapishtim, the only man to whom the gods granted eternal life after surviving a great universal flood. The epic is much more than an adventure. It is the first great reflection on the human condition. Friendship, grief, pride, and finally, the acceptance of death as part of life. It is a mirror in which, after more than 4,000 years, we can still see ourselves reflected. Stories like this show us that the fundamental concerns of human beings have not changed. They are ancient truths that resonate strongly in our time, and it is a privilege to be able to share them with you. But the history of the Sumerians was not a path of continuous peace and progress. For centuries, the Sumerian city-states were in constant conflict with each other. Uruk, Lagash, Ur. They fought fiercely for control of the farmland and water rights. A famous example is the long and bloody war between Lagash and its neighbor over the fertile plain of Guadena, a conflict documented on the steles of the kings of Lagash. This chronic warfare and shifting alliances progressively weakened them, making them vulnerable to a new emerging power from the north, the Akkadians. In the year 2334 before Christ, a charismatic and brutal figure named Sargon of Akkad forcibly unified the Sumerian and Akkadian cities, creating the first multi-ethnic empire in history, the Akkadian Empire. Sargon, whose legend says he was abandoned at birth and raised by a gardener, was a military and political genius. He created a professional standing army, the first of its kind, and established a new capital, Akkad. Although the Akkadians adopted and adapted Sumerian culture, religion and writing, Sumerian political dominance as an independent force had ended. However, the Sumerian spirit did not die. Their culture fused with that of the conquerors in a synthesis that would dominate Mesopotamia. Centuries later, after the collapse of the Akkadian Empire, the region experienced a period of fragmentation, until the Sumerian cities rose again one last time. During the so-called Sumerian Renaissance, the Sumerians were the first to tame the environment, to create the first city-states, the first to create written laws to govern thousands of people, the first to invent the wheel and writing. They were the first to look at the stars, and not just see gods, but patterns and cycles. Wondering about their place in the cosmos, they were the first to write about friendship, loss, and the search for immortality. They showed that humankind is capable of creating order from chaos, of leaving an indelible mark on the sands of time. Their knowledge was not lost. It was inherited by the Babylonians, who perfected their astronomy and mathematics. It passed to the Assyrians, who used it to administer their vast empire. It was translated and studied by the Greeks, who saw in Mesopotamia the cradle of wisdom. And through a long and often broken chain of manuscripts and translations, that ancestral knowledge reached us. The story of the Sumerians is a powerful reminder that our world did not emerge from nothing. It was built brick by brick, idea by idea, on the shoulders of these giants who lived and died millennia ago in a land between two rivers. The past is full of these incredible stories, of these forgotten peoples who shaped our present in ways we can't even imagine. Unearthing their truths, listening to their voices across the silence of centuries is our passion. It's a journey that connects us with the very essence of what it means to be human. Our capacity to create, to dream, to organize, and to question our purpose. If you're fascinated by discovering the origins of our world, if you feel the same curiosity we do for the civilizations that laid it all down, we invite you to join our community. Subscribe to Ancient Truths. Together, we can follow the echo of these giants throughout history.